Well, let's talk about the next issue in this module and unit, and that's the methods and the techniques we use so we know how to conduct the research to delve into our research questions. A couple of comments here on my fancy display board here. After, not before. What does that mean? Well, oftentimes we get, for whatever reason, thinking that we ought to identify the method that we're going to use to conduct our doctoral dissertation research before we really clarify what it is we want to investigate. And that almost always delays and causes problems as you are trying to conceptualize your dissertation topic and convince others that it's worthwhile. In other words, we should identify clearly what it is we're interested in studying and then choose the most appropriate method to allow us to scientifically investigate that situation, that phenomena, whatever it is that we're investigating and beginning to look at. And in that process then, we need to know what the methods are, what are the realm of possibilities. And interestingly enough, and difficult enough, there are literally dozens of different methods within education and in other disciplines that we might apply to our research questions. First of all, we need to be sure that we have a general reference. Now, these are the reference books that you use in your Methods of Inquiry class. If you've not taken it, you will be taking it quite shortly. Creswell has a series of books and is one of the probably best references in terms of the general educational research methodologies that are available. But there are also others. Here's Gay's book, and there are literally dozens of reference books that you ought to have and keep. Make sure that when you take your Methods of Inquiry class, you obtain a hard copy of this book, because this is of whatever the book is that's being used in that class, because this is a reference that you will use regularly throughout your doctoral program, not just in Methods of Inquiry, and not really just for your dissertation, but also in other classes also. So your general methods. And then when it gets down to the specific, let's say you're going to do a focus group, or let's say you're going to do a phenomenological study, or let's say you're going to do reflective interviewing, or let's say you're going to do some kind of a perceptual analysis, or let's say you're going to do a content analysis. How do you know how to go about that particular study? We are not psychometrics experts. In other words, we in instructional technology and distance education are not methods of inquiry experts. So what should we do? Well, go to the experts. Follow their directions. I like to use the analogy of cooks. If you want to know how to cook a meatloaf, you don't want to study all the different kinds of things that a person might study if they're in a home economics curriculum or they're in a family and consumer science curriculum. We want to go to the Betty Crocker cookbook, take it off the shelf, and follow the directions. Get the ingredients, mix them the way Betty Crocker's cookbook says, and follow them that way. Well, in education and research, that's the SAGE publications, and I've collected a bunch of them here. SAGE publications are what I like to call cookbooks. Here's one on doing interviews. Here's one on interviews and qualitative research. Here's one on qualitative interviewing. And here's one on reflective interviewing. All are similar but somewhat different depending upon the kind of research and the kind of interviewing process you're going to be looking at. I mentioned phenomenological. Here are two books on phenomenological research, both published by SAGE, both excellent resources and very specific to the method of phenomenological research that give you the procedures you should follow. Here's one on cost effectiveness from SAGE. Here's one on focus groups from SAGE. Here's one on policy analysis from SAGE. Here's one on how to measure attitudes, one of my favorites from SAGE, giving you a technique for how you scientifically measure in the affective domain rather than the cognitive domain. Here's another on focus groups. Here's one on survey methods, although you'll hear when I talk in one of the other videos in this sequence that we kind of discourage surveys because they are so problematic, so difficult to conduct. So when you identify your research idea, what it is you want to investigate, that's when you should then find yourself a general reference and find yourself specific references for how you go about conducting that research, and follow this process. Hope this helps.